Sometimes life feels like you're walking through a world where everyone belongs except you. That's exactly how Maya felt when she clicked Buy Now on a ghost town for $100. Her faithful dog Chester sleeping beside her laptop. What started as an impulsive purchase from loneliness became something extraordinary. Deep in Nevada's desert, the abandoned town of Millfield held secrets that would change everything. When Maya arrived with nothing but hope and her loyal companion, she discovered something remarkable. Hidden in the shadows, a group of forgotten children had been surviving on their own, creating family from ruins. But what happens when the outside world threatens to destroy their newfound sanctuary and everything they've built? Before we continue this incredible journey, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, just make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I have something truly special saved for you. Maya Jenkins stared at the glow of her computer screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as another day of remote work blended into another evening of solitude. The San Francisco apartment that had once felt like freedom now resembled a gilded cage, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased a city full of people she never seemed to connect with. At 28, she possessed the technical skills that companies coveted and the emotional intelligence that relationships required, yet somehow found herself drifting through life like a ghost in her own story. Chester lifted his graying muzzle from his worn bed beside her desk, those knowing brown eyes reflecting the screen's blue light. The 10-year-old German Shepherd mix had been her constant companion since college, rescued from a shelter during her senior year when loneliness had nearly consumed her. His collar, faded leather with brass studs that had lost their shine, bore the scratches and wear of countless adventures together. Every mark told a story of loyalty that transcended words. "Another exciting Friday night, boy," Maya murmured, scratching behind his ears. Chester's tail thumped against the hardwood floor, a sound that had become her favorite music. While her colleagues shared weekend plans in video meetings, Maya found her truest conversations happened with a dog who listened without judgment and offered comfort without condition. The irony wasn't lost on her that she worked in social media. Technology, creating platforms designed to connect people while feeling increasingly isolated herself. Her job at Connect Now involved analyzing user engagement patterns, designing algorithms that would bring strangers together over shared interests. She understood the mathematics of human connection better than most, yet struggled to apply those formulas to her own life. Maya's parents called every Sunday from their retirement home in Arizona, their voices carrying the gentle concern that only comes from watching your child succeed professionally while failing personally. They'd raised her to be independent, strong, capable of anything she set her mind to. They'd also taught her that family meant everything, a lesson that stung more sharply with each passing year as her own remained undefined. Dating apps yielded conversations that fizzled after a few exchanges. Professional networking events left her feeling like she was performing a role rather than being herself. Even her book club, chosen specifically to meet like-minded people, had become an exercise in polite small talk over wine that tasted increasingly bitter. The city promised opportunity and connection, but delivered competition and surface-level interactions instead. Chester seemed to sense her restlessness that particular evening in March, nudging her hand away from the laptop to remind her that life existed beyond the screen. His instincts had always been remarkable, alerting her to thunderstorms hours before they arrived, sensing her moods before she fully understood them herself. Tonight, his behavior carried an unusual urgency, as if he knew something significant was about to happen. "You're right. We should take a break," Maya said, closing her work applications and opening a new browser tab. Instead of checking social media or streaming services, her fingers typed a search query that surprised even her: abandoned places for sale. She couldn't explain the impulse, only that something deep inside her craved authenticity, space, the possibility of building something real rather than virtual. The search results revealed a fascinating world she'd never considered. Ghost towns, defunct mining operations, abandoned homesteads scattered across the American West. Each listing told a story of dreams deferred, communities dissolved, families who had moved on in search of better opportunities. Maya found herself drawn to the photographs, imagining the lives that had once filled these empty spaces. That's when she discovered the auction site specializing in forgotten properties. Most carried price tags in the thousands or tens of thousands, reasonable for land, but beyond her savings after student loans and city living expenses. She scrolled through pages of listings, each more intriguing than the last, until she found it. Millfield, Nevada, historic ghost town, starting bid $100. The description was minimal, almost dismissively brief. Approximately 2.3 acres, including 6 standing structures in various states of repair. Property sold as is, with no warranties, buyer responsible for all inspections, utilities and access arrangements. Mineral rights excluded. Remote location requires 4-wheel drive access. 6 blurry photographs showed weathered wooden buildings against a backdrop of desert mountains. A faded welcome sign, its paint peeling like ancient bark, marked the entrance to what had once been someone's vision of community. Maya studied each image, trying to imagine the town in its heyday, families moving through daily routines, children playing in dusty streets, hopes and dreams taking root in harsh soil. Chester approached her chair, resting his heavy head on her thigh. His presence anchored her as wild thoughts began forming. What if she could restore something forgotten? What if disconnection from virtual community could lead to connection with something real and tangible? The idea seemed simultaneously ridiculous and inevitable, like destiny disguised as impulse. The auction had 12 hours remaining. Current bid, $100. No other participants appeared interested in a ghost town 6 hours from the nearest major city, accessible only by dirt roads that might not survive the next flash flood. Maya read the legal disclaimers, researched Nevada property law, and calculated the logistics of such an absurd purchase. Her savings account contained enough for the bid, travel expenses, and several months of basic supplies. Her job could be performed from anywhere with internet access, and satellite connections reached even remote locations these days. The more she considered it, the less impossible it seemed. Chester seemed to approve, his steady presence providing the emotional foundation her logical mind needed to process such an unprecedented decision. Maya researched Millfield's history through online archives and historical societies. Founded in 1887 during a silver mining boom, it had thrived briefly before economic shifts and resource depletion forced gradual abandonment by the 1940s. Census records showed a peak population of 234 residents, including families, who had built schools, churches, and businesses in the harsh desert environment. Their determination impressed her, their willingness to create community in the most unlikely places. As the auction's final hour approached, Maya found herself creating mental lists of supplies, researching portable generators and water purification systems, imagining conversations with Chester about their new adventure. The dog seemed to sense the significance of the moment, remaining closer than usual, his warm presence a reminder that she wasn't truly alone. With 30 minutes remaining, Maya placed her bid, $100. The system confirmed her registration, provided wire transfer instructions, and warned that all sales were final. She sat back in her chair, heart racing with the possibility that she might actually win ownership of an entire town for the cost of a nice dinner in San Francisco. Chester stood and walked to the window, his silhouette framed against the city. In lights, his posture suggested alertness, anticipation, as if he too understood that their life was about to change fundamentally. Maya joined him at the glass, looking out over a million strangers living in proximity but not connection, and wondered if the answer to her loneliness might lie not in finding more people, but in finding the right place. The auction ended at midnight. Maya refreshed the page once, twice, then felt her breath catch as the results loaded. Winner, M. Jenkins 2024. Purchase price, $100. She owned a ghost town. Chester turned from the window and placed his paw on her foot, his tail wagging. With what seemed like approval, Maya knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his familiar warmth, and whispered the words that would change everything. "Looks like we're going home, boy, to a place we've never been, but somehow belongs to us now." The GPS signal died 50 miles outside of Reno, leaving Maya with handwritten directions and an increasingly skeptical sense of adventure. Her Honda Pilot navigated dirt roads that seemed more like suggestions than actual paths, while Chester maintained his post in the passenger seat, nose pressed to the window as unfamiliar scents reached him through the air conditioning vents. The Nevada landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, marked only by sagebrush and the occasional abandoned structure that hinted at humanity's brief passage through this unforgiving territory. After 3 hours of cautious driving, Maya crested a small ridge and saw it, the weathered welcome sign that had appeared in the auction photographs. Millfield, established 1887, population. The final number had faded beyond recognition, leaving only ghostly traces of paint against sun-bleached wood. Something about the sign struck her as peculiar, though she couldn't immediately identify what. The wood appeared more weathered than the metal brackets holding it, as if someone had maintained the hardware while allowing the message itself to fade deliberately. Chester whined softly. His ears perked forward in the way that meant he detected something significant. Maya parked beside the sign and stepped out, immediately struck by the profound silence that surrounded them. No traffic, no mechanical sounds, no human voices, just wind whistling through hidden crevices and the distant cry of a hawk circling. Overhead, the air carried scents of sage and dust, mixed with something else she couldn't quite identify. The main street of Millfield stretched before them like a scene from a Western movie, complete with wooden sidewalks and buildings that leaned slightly inward as if sharing secrets. 6 structures stood in various states of preservation: a general store with intact windows, a church with a steeple that had lost its cross, something that might have been a saloon, 2 residential buildings, and a larger structure that could have served as a hotel or boarding house. Maya had expected complete ruin, but these buildings showed signs of recent maintenance: new boards patching old walls, fresh caulking around some windows, and roof lines that appeared surprisingly intact. Chester jumped down from the car and immediately began investigating scent trails that crisscrossed the dusty ground. His behavior suggested active interest rather than simple curiosity, nose working overtime as he processed information that remained invisible to Maya. She followed his lead, noting details that the auction photographs had failed to capture. Footprints in the dust near the general store, a small pile of tin cans beside the church that seemed too neat to be decades-old litter, and laundry lines strung between buildings that definitely hadn't appeared in any historical documentation. "This is strange, Chester," Maya murmured, her voice seeming unnaturally loud in the desert stillness. "Someone's been here recently." Chester responded with a low whuff of agreement, his attention focused on the largest building at the end of the street. His posture had shifted from curious to alert, tail held high but not wagging, ears rotating to catch sounds that Maya couldn't perceive. She approached the general store first, noting that the front door hung slightly ajar despite appearing locked in the photographs. The interior revealed shelves lined with modern canned goods, plastic water bottles, and camping supplies that definitely hadn't been manufactured in the 1940s. A small, battery-powered radio sat on the counter beside a logbook filled with handwritten entries in different scripts. Maya flipped through pages that documented weather patterns, supply inventories, and what appeared to be lesson plans for basic subjects like reading and arithmetic. Her hands trembled as the implications began registering. This wasn't an abandoned ghost town. It was an occupied one. Someone or multiple someones lived here and had been maintaining these buildings, stocking supplies and possibly educating children. The auction had been completely misrepresented, or whoever conducted the sale had no idea that their abandoned property housed actual residents. Chester's warning bark echoed from somewhere deeper in town, sharp and urgent in a way that meant immediate attention was required. Maya dropped the logbook and ran toward the sound, her heart pounding as worst-case scenarios flooded her imagination. She found Chester standing rigid outside the largest building, his focus trained on a second-story window where a curtain had moved despite the absence of any breeze. "Hello?" Maya called out, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm Maya, and I think I might be the new owner of this property. I don't want to cause any trouble. I just need to understand what's happening here." Silence followed her words, heavy and charged with tension. Chester maintained his alert posture, occasionally glancing back at Maya as if to confirm she understood the gravity of the situation. Movement caught her peripheral vision. A small face appeared briefly at a ground floor window of the church before disappearing again. Then another younger face at the boarding house. Maya's breath caught as she realized she was looking at children, multiple children who had been living in secret in her accidentally purchased ghost town. "I can see you," Maya said gently, crouching down to appear less threatening. "And I'm not going to hurt anyone or call the authorities. I just need to understand what's going on." Chester seemed to approve of her tone, his stance relaxing slightly while remaining watchful. A door creaked open behind her. Maya turned slowly to find a girl who appeared to be about 14, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, clothes clean but obviously well worn. Her eyes held a wariness that suggested experiences far beyond her years, and she clutched something, a kitchen knife, Maya realized, in her right hand. "You're not supposed to be here," the girl said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "This is our home." "I know," Maya replied, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. "And I'm sorry for intruding. I bought this place online without realizing anyone lived here. My name is Maya, and this is Chester. We're not here to cause problems." The girl studied Maya for long moments, clearly weighing options that might determine the fate of whatever community she was protecting. Other faces appeared at windows and doorways. Maya counted at least 5 more children, ranging in age from perhaps 6 to 15, all watching with the same combination of fear and defiance. "How many of you are there?" Maya asked softly. "Enough," the girl replied, "and we take care of each other. We don't need adults coming in and messing things up." The words carried a bitterness that suggested previous experience with adults who had indeed messed things up. Possibly catastrophically, Chester took a careful step forward, his body language shifting to the gentle posture he used around nervous animals or small children. The girl noticed his approach, but didn't retreat, suggesting some familiarity with dogs. Another child emerged from the church, a boy of perhaps 10 with bright eyes and dirt-stained clothes, who seemed less frightened than curious. "Is that a police dog?" he asked. "No, he's just my friend," Maya answered. "He's very gentle with children. Would you like to meet him?" The boy looked to the older girl for permission. Some unspoken communication passed between them before she nodded slightly. Chester approached slowly, allowing the boy to extend his hand for sniffing before offering his head for tentative petting. The simple interaction seemed to shift the entire atmosphere, other children emerging more boldly from their hiding places. Maya realized she was looking at something extraordinary, a community of children who had somehow found each other and created a functional family in one of the most isolated places imaginable. Her mind raced with questions about their backgrounds, their survival methods, their legal status, and the implications of her accidental intrusion into their carefully constructed world. "We need to talk," the older girl said finally. "All of us, because if you really own this place, everything just changed." Her words carried the weight of someone who had learned to think strategically about adult complications, and Maya felt a profound responsibility settling on her shoulders. Chester seemed to sense the moment's significance, moving to position himself between Maya and the children in what appeared to be a protective but welcoming gesture. His presence suggested that whatever happened next, this unexpected family had gained at least one adult advocate who might actually deserve their trust. The ghost town of Millfield was about to become something entirely different from what Maya had imagined when she placed that impulsive $100 bid. Looking at the faces surrounding her, some hopeful, some wary, all clearly resilient beyond their years, she realized her search for connection had led her to the most important discovery of her life. The meeting took place in the general store, which Maya discovered served as the community's main gathering space. 7 children arranged themselves in a loose semicircle on overturned crates and boxes, while Chester positioned himself near the center of the group, somehow managing to provide comfort to everyone simultaneously. Maya sat on the floor, deliberately, placing herself at the children's eye level to minimize any perceived threat her adult status might represent. "I'm Sage," the older girl said, introducing herself with the careful formality of someone accustomed to handling grown-up responsibilities. "I've been here the longest, about 2 years now. That's Marcus," she indicated the boy who had approached. "Chester, then there's Luna, David, Carmen, Zoe, and little Phoenix." Each child acknowledged their name with a nod or small wave, though their wariness remained evident. Maya studied their faces, noting the family resemblance that had nothing to do with genetics and everything to do with shared experience. They moved with the unconscious coordination of people who had learned to depend completely on each other, anticipating needs and responding to subtle signals that outsiders would miss entirely. "How do you all know each other?" Maya asked gently. "We found each other," Luna replied. She appeared to be around 12, with striking green eyes and auburn hair that caught the afternoon light streaming through the store windows. "Some of us were in foster care, some were on the streets. Word gets around about safe places, if you know how to listen." Marcus pulled a folded paper from his pocket, spreading it carefully on the counter between them. Maya recognized it immediately as the artifact that would define this chapter, a hand-drawn map of extraordinary detail and precision. The document showed not just the visible buildings of Millfield, but secret passages between structures, hidden water sources, storage areas, and escape routes that crisscrossed the entire town. Different colored pencils marked safe zones, warning areas, and what appeared to be emergency protocols. "We know every inch of this place," Marcus explained with obvious pride. "Every loose board, every way in and out, every place to hide, if necessary." Luna drew most of it, but we all contributed. The map revealed a level of organization and strategic thinking that impressed Maya deeply. These children hadn't just been surviving. They had been thriving through careful planning and mutual support. "The tunnels under the church connect to the root cellar behind the boarding house," Sage added, pointing to red lines on the map. "The old mine shaft has a secondary entrance through the hotel basement. We've got 3 different water sources, and enough canned goods stored in various locations to last 6 months." She spoke with the quiet confidence of a quartermaster discussing supply lines, and Maya realized that whatever circumstances had brought these children together had also forced them to develop skills that most adults never acquired. Chester had gradually moved closer to the younger children, allowing Phoenix, who couldn't be more than 7, to lean against his warm flank while thumb-sucking quietly. The boy's presence seemed to calm everyone, his steady breathing and gentle demeanor creating a buffer zone where fear could transform into cautious hope. "What about school?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "We teach each other," Carmen spoke up for the first time. At 13, she possessed an intensity that suggested significant intellectual gifts. "Luna's brilliant with numbers, Sage knows history and government stuff, I'm good with science and reading." The older ones teach the younger ones, and everyone contributes what they can. She gestured toward a corner where Maya noticed textbooks, notebooks, and learning materials arranged with careful organization. David, who appeared to be about 11 and had remained silent until now, suddenly stood and walked to a wooden crate. He returned with a small library of books, everything from elementary readers to advanced mathematics texts, clearly salvaged from various sources but maintained with obvious care. "We're not stupid just because we don't go to regular school," he said with quiet dignity. "Sometimes we learn more here than we ever did in classrooms, where nobody cared if we understood anything." Maya felt something twist in her chest as she recognized the defensive pride that came from children who had been dismissed or overlooked by institutional systems designed to help them. Their intelligence was evident in every aspect of their community organization, from the sophisticated mapping system to the educational structure they had created for themselves. "I never thought you were stupid," Maya said firmly. "Actually, I'm amazed by what you've built here. This level of organization and planning would impress most adult communities." The children exchanged glances that suggested they weren't accustomed to adult validation, and Maya realized how starved they might be for genuine recognition of their achievements. Chester seemed to sense the emotional undercurrents rising and moving to each child in turn, offering his head for petting and his presence for comfort. Phoenix giggled when Chester's tail accidentally tickled his face, and even Sage's serious expression softened when the dog nuzzled her hand. "The question is," Sage said, returning to the practical concerns that clearly weighed on her mind, "what happens now that you're here? Are you going to turn us over to social services? Sell the property to someone who will?" Her directness cut straight to the heart of Maya's internal struggle. Maya looked around the store that had been transformed into something between a classroom and a family room, noting the careful details that spoke of children who had created stability from chaos. Hand-sewn curtains, repaired furniture, books arranged by height and subject matter, a small area near the window where art supplies and drawing suggested creative expression hadn't been sacrificed to mere survival. "I don't know," Maya answered honestly. "This isn't what I expected when I bought this place, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. You've clearly created something special here, and I don't want to destroy that." She paused, studying their faces as they processed her words. "But I also can't ignore the legal and safety issues. Your children living without official adult supervision in the middle of nowhere. What if someone gets seriously hurt? What if authorities find out and blame me for not reporting it?" "We've been taking care of ourselves just fine," Marcus said, with a hint of defiance. "Adults haven't exactly been reliable in most of our lives." Maya nodded, acknowledging the truth behind his words, without dismissing the legitimate concerns that kept circling through her mind. Her software engineering background had taught her to think systematically about complex problems, but this situation involved variables that couldn't be coded or debugged through logical processes alone. Chester had settled beside Phoenix, who was now openly petting the dog's ears while whispering secrets that only he could hear. The sight triggered something protective in Maya, a fierce desire to ensure that this child, all of these children, never experienced abandonment or betrayal again. "Can you show me more of how this works?" Maya asked finally. "Your daily routines, your safety protocols, how you handle problems that come up. I need to understand what you've built before I can figure out how to protect it." The relief that crossed their faces was profound, and Maya realized her words had offered something they desperately needed. An adult who wanted to understand rather than immediately change or dismantle their carefully constructed world. Maya's decision crystallized during her second night in Millfield, as she lay in her sleeping bag in the back of her Honda Pilot while Chester snored softly beside her. Through the rear window, she could see lights flickering in the boarding house where the children had offered her space, but which she had declined, not wanting to intrude on their established routines until trust had been fully earned. Those lights represented something profound, a community that functioned on care, mutual responsibility, and shared resources rather than individual accumulation. By dawn, she had made her choice. Instead of returning to San Francisco to figure out next steps from a distance, she would stay and learn how to be the kind of adult these children deserved, one who enhanced rather than disrupted the remarkable thing they had built together. "I need to make some phone calls and arrange for supplies," Maya announced over breakfast, which took place communally in the general store around a table that David and Marcus had constructed from salvaged materials. "If I'm going to be here for more than a few days, we should improve some of the basic infrastructure." She watched their faces carefully, looking for signs of resistance to her involvement. "What kind of improvements?" Sage asked with the caution of someone who had learned to be suspicious of adult promises. Maya pulled out her laptop, opening the spreadsheet where she had been calculating possibilities since midnight. Solar panels and battery storage for reliable electricity, water filtration and pumping systems, better heating for winter, internet, access, so you can continue your education and stay connected to the outside world safely. She turned the screen toward them. "I can afford the initial setup, and my job pays well enough to maintain it." The children exchanged glances that Maya was beginning to recognize as their method of silent communication. Luna, who had been quiet during breakfast, suddenly spoke up. "You mean you'd stay here permanently? Not just visit and then leave?" "I think so, yes," Maya replied. "San Francisco never felt like home anyway. Maybe this place can be home for all of us." Carmen's eyes lit up with an enthusiasm she had been carefully restraining. Real electricity would mean we could have proper lighting for studying after dark, and maybe even a refrigerator for fresh food instead of just canned stuff. "And internet means we could take online courses," David added, practically bouncing in his excitement. "There are so many subjects we can't learn from the books we've found." Maya spent the morning on her satellite phone, arranging for delivery of supplies that would transform Millfield from a subsistence community into a comfortable modern homestead. The central artifact of this transformation would be the solar panel array, 12 panels that would be delivered within the week, along with the battery bank and inverter system necessary to provide reliable power to all 6 buildings. While she handled logistics, the children demonstrated their own capabilities in ways that continuously amazed her. Phoenix, despite his young age, possessed an almost supernatural ability to locate lost objects and identify the sources of mysterious sounds. Zoe, who was 8 and had barely spoken the previous day, revealed herself as an artist whose drawings captured emotional truths that most adults struggled to express in words. Marcus proved to be a mechanical genius, understanding the workings of complex systems through intuition and experimentation. "He fixed our water pump last month," Sage explained, as they watched Marcus diagnose a problem with the store's front door. "None of us understood why it kept cutting out, but he listened to it for about 10 minutes and then rebuilt the whole pressure switch from spare parts." Maya recognized talent that had been ignored or dismissed by institutional systems designed to identify and nurture potential. These children had been developing their abilities in spite of their circumstances, not because of any adult guidance. They had received. The thought of what they might accomplish with proper resources and support made her heart race with possibilities. The first external threat appeared on their 3rd day together, announced by Chester's low growling from his position near the front window. Maya looked up from the solar panel installation manual to see a dust cloud approaching from the direction of the main road. Through binoculars, she could make out a white sedan that definitely didn't belong to anyone who lived in Millfield. Everyone. Inside, Sage commanded with authority that would have impressed a military officer. The children vanished with practiced efficiency, implementing protocols from their hand-drawn map that transformed the town from occupied to apparently empty within 60 seconds. Maya marveled at their coordination while feeling a surge of protective anger at the circumstances that had made such skills necessary. Chester remained alert beside her as the sedan pulled up to the welcome sign. Two figures emerged, a woman in a business suit carrying a clipboard and a man with a badge that caught the sunlight. Maya's blood pressure spiked as she recognized the combination. Social services and law enforcement conducting some kind of investigation. "Stay here," she whispered to Chester, who clearly disagreed with that instruction but obeyed anyway. Maya walked out to meet the visitors with what she hoped appeared to be casual confidence rather than barely controlled panic. "Good afternoon," the woman called out. "I'm Janet Morrison from Clark County Social Services, and this is Deputy Martinez. We received a report about children living in this area without proper adult supervision. Would you happen to know anything about that?" Maya felt her training in crisis management kick in, the same skills she used when server crashes threatened. To destroy user data, stay calm, gather information, buy time to develop solutions. "I'm Maya Jenkins, and I recently purchased this property. I haven't seen any children, but it's a big area to cover." "What kind of report did you receive?" "Anonymous tip came in yesterday," Deputy Martinez replied. "Claimed to see kids playing around these buildings. We're required to investigate any reports involving potential child endangerment." His tone suggested routine rather than urgent. Concern, which Maya interpreted as slightly encouraging. Janet Morrison was already walking toward the buildings, making notes on her clipboard. "These structures appear to be in better condition than I expected for an abandoned property. Have you been doing renovation work?" Maya's mind raced through explanations that might satisfy their investigation without revealing the children's presence. Behind the store windows, she caught a glimpse of movement that told her the children were listening to every word. Their fate depending on her ability to navigate this conversation successfully. "I'm still assessing what needs to be done," Maya answered carefully. "It's a big project, and I'm taking it slow to make sure I understand what I'm working with." She gestured toward the boarding house where the solar panels would be installed. "My plan is to make this place livable again, but it's going to take time. The next few minutes would determine whether their fragile new family would survive its first real test." The investigation lasted 45 minutes that felt like hours, with Maya deflecting questions while the children remained hidden, according to protocols perfected through necessity. Janet Morrison and Deputy Martinez finally departed after finding no evidence of current child occupation, though Maya noticed them exchanging meaningful glances that suggested this wouldn't be their last visit to Millfield. Once the dust from their departure had settled, the children emerged from hiding spaces that Maya hadn't even known existed. She watched them reappear from root cellars, false walls, and concealed passages that transformed their home into something resembling a sophisticated safe house. The efficiency of their disappearance and re-emergence spoke to experiences that no child should have to develop. "We need to be more careful," Sage announced, though her tone carried weariness rather than fear. "Someone reported us, which means somebody knows we're here who shouldn't." She moved to the battery-powered emergency radio that sat prominently on the general store's main counter, the artifact that had become their lifeline to monitoring external threats. Maya had noticed the radio during her first day, but hadn't understood its significance until now. The device was never turned off, constantly scanning police frequencies, emergency channels, and local news broadcasts for information that might affect their safety. Luna operated it with practiced expertise, adjusting dials and frequencies. With the skill of someone who had learned that advance warning could mean the difference between safety and disaster. "Scanner picked up the call yesterday morning," Luna explained as she fine-tuned the reception. "Someone reported possible vagrant. Children in the area. Signal was too weak to identify the source, but it came from close enough to see us clearly." Her technical competence impressed Maya, who recognized the sophisticated understanding of radio communications required to operate such monitoring effectively. As the immediate crisis receded, Maya found herself drawn into deeper conversations, with each child learning the stories that had brought them to Millfield and kept them together, despite circumstances that would have broken most adult communities. These weren't casual tales of temporary hardship, but profound narratives of survival against systematic failure. Carmen had aged out of foster care at 18, then spent 2 years helping younger children escape situations that ranged from neglectful to actively dangerous. "The system is designed to process people, not help them," she explained during one of their evening conversations. "I watched kids get bounced between homes where nobody cared about anything except the monthly check. Some places were worse than others, but none of them were actually home." David's story emerged more gradually, revealed through fragments that suggested trauma too complex for direct discussion. His intelligence had made him a target in traditional school settings, while his emotional sensitivity had been interpreted as weakness by foster families seeking easier placements. "Smart kids who feel too much don't fit anywhere," he said with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who had accepted difficult truths about the world. Marcus had lived on the streets of Las Vegas for 6 months before finding his way to Millfield, surviving through mechanical skills that allowed him to repair bicycles, small appliances, and anything else that generated enough income for basic necessities. His ability to diagnose and fix complex problems had made him invaluable to their community, though Maya suspected his talents extended far beyond mechanical systems. Each story reinforced Maya's growing understanding that these children hadn't chosen alternative living arrangements. They had been failed by conventional systems and forced to create their own solutions. Her maternal instincts, dormant for 28 years, awakened with fierce protectiveness that surprised her with its intensity. The solar panel installation became a community project that demonstrated how Maya's technical skills could enhance, rather than replace the children's existing capabilities. While she designed the electrical systems and managed the delivery logistics, they provided labor, local knowledge, and creative problem-solving that made the project successful in ways she never could have achieved alone. "We should mount the main array on the hotel roof," Marcus suggested after studying Maya's preliminary plans. "Best sun exposure, and we can run conduit through the old ventilation system without having to dig new trenches." His understanding of the building's structural details, combined with Maya's knowledge of electrical systems, produced solutions that neither could have developed independently. Phoenix surprised everyone by revealing an almost supernatural ability to predict weather patterns, a skill that proved crucial for timing the installation work. "Big storm coming day after tomorrow," he announced on Tuesday morning, though the sky showed no visible signs of changing weather. By Wednesday evening, the wind was howling hard enough to make any rooftop work impossible, validating his prediction and earning him a permanent role as their meteorological consultant. The radio continued its constant monitoring, becoming the soundtrack to their daily activities, as Luna maintained watch for threats while participating in installation work. Maya learned to interpret the various codes and signals that indicated official attention to their area, understanding how the children had developed early warning systems that allowed them to maintain their sanctuary despite proximity to authorities, who would dismantle it if discovery occurred. "Social services will be back," Sage predicted during a planning session that took place around the newly functional electrical panel. "They don't usually give up after one visit, especially when someone specifically reported children in the area." Her assessment carried the authority of someone who had learned to think strategically about adult institutional behavior. Maya nodded, recognizing the accuracy of Sage's prediction, while also understanding that her own presence had fundamentally changed the legal and practical dynamics of the situation. "When they come back, I'll be here officially," she said. "Property owner conducting renovation work has every right to be on site, and I can provide adult supervision for any children who might be visiting." The distinction between residing permanently and visiting frequently might seem trivial to outsiders, but Maya understood it could make the difference between family preservation and forced separation. Her background in technology had taught her that complex systems often succeeded or failed based on seemingly minor implementation details. As evening approached and the first solar-powered lights illuminated their community, Maya realized they had accomplished something extraordinary, proof that their alternative family structure could not only survive but thrive when provided with appropriate resources and genuine adult support. The children's faces, lit by clean electricity instead of flickering candles, reflected hope that had been carefully guarded but never entirely abandoned. Chester had claimed his role as official greeter and protector, positioning himself where he could monitor both the radio communications and the approaches to town. His presence provided comfort to everyone, while serving as an additional early warning system for threats that electronic monitoring might miss. The emergency radio crackled with routine traffic as Maya settled into her sleeping bag, now set up in the boarding house where the children had insisted she belonged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight their community felt secure, connected, and ready to face whatever tests lay ahead. Maya discovered the photo album quite by accident while helping Luna organize the makeshift library that occupied 2 rooms of the boarding house. A leather-bound volume had fallen behind a shelf during one of the children's reorganization projects, its presence forgotten until Chester's curious sniffing led them to investigate the mysterious scent of old paper and faded photographs. "This wasn't here when we moved in," Luna said, as they carefully opened the album's brittle covers. "We've been through every inch of this place multiple times." The first pages revealed black and white photographs from Millfield's heyday, showing families posed in front of buildings that Maya now recognized as their current homes. Men in work clothes and women in long dresses stood proudly beside children whose faces carried the same determined expressions she saw every day in her current companions. As they turned pages, Maya began noticing something extraordinary, facial features that seemed to echo across the decades. A girl in a 1920s photograph bore an unmistakable resemblance to Carmen, while a young boy standing beside the general store could have been Marcus's grandfather. The similarities were too striking to dismiss as coincidence. "Look at this," Maya whispered, pointing to a group photograph labeled Millfield School, Class of 1923. Among the dozen children gathered on the church steps, she could identify features that appeared to have been passed down through generations to the children now living in the same buildings. "I think some of you might have ancestral connections to the original families who lived here." Sage joined them, studying the photographs with the analytical intensity she applied to all important matters. "That would explain why this place felt safe immediately," she said thoughtfully. "Sometimes you just know where you belong, even when you can't explain why." Her words carried the weight of someone who had spent years searching for exactly that sense of belonging. The album contained more than photographs. It held documents, letters, and family records that painted a picture of a community bound together by mutual support during harsh times. Maya read aloud from a letter written by a woman named Eleanor Patterson to her sister. "The children here look after each other like they're all family, whether blood-related or not. In a place this remote, we've learned that survival depends on caring for everyone's children as if they were your own." The parallels to their current situation were profound and deeply moving. These original families had faced isolation, economic hardship, and uncertain futures by creating extended family structures that transcended traditional boundaries. The children had instinctively recreated the same social organization that had allowed Millfield to thrive for over 50 years. Maya spent the following days researching legal precedents, while the children continued their daily routines of education, maintenance work, and community care. Her laptop, now powered by their solar array, became a portal to understanding the complex intersection of property law, child welfare regulations, and indigenous family structures that might provide legal protection for their unconventional household. Kinship care laws in Nevada allow children to be placed with extended family members or community connections without formal foster care processes, Maya explained during one of their evening planning sessions. If we can establish historical connections between some of you and the original Millfield families, it might provide legal justification for your residence here. Carmen, whose resemblance to the girl in the 1920s photograph was particularly striking, had become fascinated by genealogical research. My grandmother used to talk about family in Nevada, but I never paid much attention, she said, scrolling through online databases with the focused intensity of someone whose future might depend on uncovering the past. She died when I was 12, and most of her stories seemed like ancient history. The emergency radio that Luna monitored with religious dedication began picking up increased official chatter about their area. Conversations between county departments suggested coordination that went beyond routine investigation, while references to development interests and property assessments indicated external pressures that extended far beyond child welfare concerns. Someone wants this land for something, David observed after listening to several intercepted communications. His ability to analyze patterns and implications had made him their unofficial intelligence analyst, interpreting bureaucratic language to identify genuine threats among routine administrative activities. They're not just concerned about kids living here, they're concerned about anything that might interfere with future plans. Maya's research confirmed David's suspicions. Recent mineral surveys had identified potential rare earth deposits in the surrounding area, while water rights and renewable energy development had attracted attention from corporations seeking remote locations for large-scale projects. Millfield's status as an unoccupied ghost town made it an attractive acquisition target for entities that viewed children as obstacles to profit rather than people deserving protection. Chester had developed individual relationships with each child that reflected their specific needs and personalities. With Phoenix, he provided gentle comfort and patient companionship during the boy's frequent quiet moments. For Marcus, he served as an interested audience for technical explanations about mechanical projects. Zoe had discovered that Chester would sit perfectly still while she drew his portrait, providing the patient modeling that her artistic development required. Maya watched these relationships develop with growing recognition that her initial impulse purchase had connected all of them, human and canine, to something larger than individual needs or circumstances. Chester's presence had facilitated trust and healing in ways that human adults had failed to achieve, his unconditional acceptance providing a foundation for emotional security that allowed the children to risk hoping for permanent stability. The mounting external pressures reached a critical point when Luna intercepted communications indicating a coordinated visit from multiple agencies scheduled for the following week. Social services, building inspectors, environmental assessment teams, and corporate representatives would arrive simultaneously, their combined presence designed to overwhelm any resistance to their various agendas. "We have 6 days to make this legal," Maya announced, her voice carrying the determination of someone who had found her life's purpose and refused to surrender it without fighting. 6 days to establish documentation, legal standing, and evidence that what we've built here serves everyone's best interests. The children responded with the same focused intensity they had shown during the solar panel installation, each contributing their unique skills to developing strategies that might preserve their family against institutional forces designed to separate them. Maya realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. Children who'd been dismissed by conventional systems demonstrating capabilities that most adults never developed. As evening fell and their solar-powered community settled into the peaceful Rhythms that had become precious to all of them. Maya studied the historical photographs that had revealed so much about their deeper connections to this place. The faces of children from nearly a century ago seemed to watch approvingly, suggesting that Millfield had always been a sanctuary for families that didn't fit conventional definitions, but possessed the deeper bonds that allowed communities to survive and thrive against impossible odds. Tomorrow would begin the most important week of their lives together, but tonight they were home, they were family, and they were prepared to fight for both with everything they possessed. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Phoenix's uncanny ability to find lost things. While helping Maya search the boarding house basement for documentation that might support their legal case, the 7-year-old disappeared into what appeared to be a solid wall, only to emerge 5 minutes later, clutching a dust-covered metal box that none of them had known existed. "There's a secret room," Phoenix announced with the matter-of-fact tone he used for all his discoveries. "Chester smelled something interesting behind the wall, so I found the hidden latch." He set the box on Maya's lap with the careful reverence of someone who understood he had uncovered something significant. The container was locked, but Marcus's mechanical skills made quick work of the corroded mechanism. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth that had preserved them through decades of desert weather, lay documents that would change everything Maya thought she knew about her connection to Millfield. The first item was a property deed dated 1889, signed by Jeremiah Patterson and witnessed by the founding families of Millfield. Maya's hands trembled as she read the name, memories flooding back to childhood stories her grandmother had told about her great-great-grandfather's adventures in the Nevada silver mines. She had dismissed those tales as family folklore, never imagining they might be documented fact. "Patterson," she whispered, the surname that had evolved through generations of marriage and name changes until reaching her as Maya Jenkins. Her great-grandmother, Eleanor Patterson, the same Eleanor whose letters they had found in the photo album, had been born in Millfield before the family moved to California during the mining bust of the 1940s. Sage, who had been sorting through additional documents, suddenly looked up with an expression of profound amazement. "Maya, look at this. This isn't just a property deed. It's a trust document establishing Millfield as a sanctuary for displaced families." She handed over papers that revealed the town's founders had created legal structures specifically designed to provide refuge for children and families who didn't fit conventional social systems. The trust document, written in the formal language of 19th century legal prose, was extraordinarily prescient. Recognizing that society's failures to protect its most vulnerable members creates orphans in spirit if not in law, we hereby establish the township of Millfield as perpetual sanctuary for any child or family seeking refuge from systems that value conformity over humanity. Maya felt goosebumps rise on her arms as she realized the true significance of her $100 purchase. This hadn't been an impulsive decision driven by loneliness. It had been destiny fulfilling itself through technology, connecting her to a legacy she had never known existed. Carmen was examining financial documents that had been preserved alongside the deeds and trust papers. "There are mining claims here, Maya. Not just for silver, but for rare earth minerals that weren't valuable in the 1800s, but are worth millions now." Her voice carried the shock of someone realizing they were looking at documents worth more than entire city blocks in San Francisco. The mineral rights had never been sold separately from the land, meaning Maya's $100 purchase included subsurface resources that recent geological surveys had valued in the tens of millions. The same rare earth deposits that had attracted corporate attention to the area legally belonged to her through inheritance she had never known existed. Luna, still monitoring the emergency radio, suddenly turned up the volume as official communications confirmed their worst fears and best hopes simultaneously. "They know about the mineral rights," she announced. I'm picking up conversations between county officials and something called Apex Development Corporation about resolving the ownership complications before proceeding with extraction permits. Maya's mind raced as implications cascaded through her understanding. Her accidental purchase hadn't just been coincidental, it had been orchestrated by forces that wanted clear title to valuable resources. The online auction had been designed to eliminate potential heirs who might discover their legal claims, while the $100 price had been calculated to avoid attracting attention from anyone who might research the property's true value. They tried to steal my inheritance, Maya said, her voice carrying a combination of outrage and amazement. If I hadn't been desperately lonely and impulsive enough to buy a ghost town sight unseen, they would have succeeded. The irony was profound. Her isolation and spontaneous decision-making had saved both her family legacy and the children's sanctuary from corporate acquisition. Chester seemed to sense the significance of the moment, moving to sit directly beside Maya with the solid presence that had anchored her through every crisis since they arrived in Millfield. His steady warmth reminded her that discovery of legal rights meant nothing without the determination to defend them against forces that viewed children and community as obstacles to profit. David was studying copies of the geological surveys that had been included in the document collection. According to these assessments, there's enough rare earth minerals here to supply domestic technology manufacturing for decades, he said, with the analytical precision that made him their unofficial research coordinator. No wonder they want us gone. We're sitting on a strategic national resource. The trust document included provisions that were remarkably modern in their understanding of child welfare issues. Eleanor Patterson and the other founders had established legal mechanisms for recognizing chosen family structures, providing education outside conventional systems, and maintaining community autonomy in the face of external pressures that might threaten vulnerable populations. Your great-grandmother knew this day would come, Sage observed, as she read through pages of carefully crafted legal language. Not the specific circumstances, but the general pattern, powerful interests trying to displace families for economic gain. She wrote protections into the trust that are still legally valid today. Maya realized she was looking at more than historical documents. She was looking at a comprehensive legal framework that had been designed specifically to protect communities like the one they had built together. The trust included provisions for alternative education, community self-governance, and protection from forced relocation that read like a blueprint for everything they were trying to achieve. The radio crackled with increased activity as Luna picked up communications between multiple agencies coordinating their planned invasion of Millfield. Corporate representatives were arriving earlier than scheduled, their urgency suggesting they knew about the document discovery, despite the children's careful security methods. "We have until tomorrow morning," Luna announced grimly. "Full tactical response from social services, building inspectors, environmental teams, and Apex Development. They're bringing enough people to overwhelm any resistance we might organize." Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders as she realized that tomorrow's confrontation would determine not just their family's survival, but the fate of resources that could influence national technology independence for generations. The stakes had escalated far beyond personal desires for connection and community. But as she looked around at the children who had become her family, and at Chester who had guided them all to this moment of destiny, Maya felt something she had never experienced before: absolute certainty about her purpose in life. She possessed the legal right, the moral authority, and the fierce determination necessary to protect both the community they had built and the legacy her ancestors had established for exactly this moment. The ghost town of Millfield was about to become the center of a battle between corporate power and family preservation. With Maya Jenkins, no longer a lonely software engineer, but a descendant of visionary founders, standing at the intersection of past wisdom and future hope. Tomorrow would bring the fight of their lives, but tonight they were armed with truth, law, and the unbreakable bonds that had connected them across generations of struggle and survival. Maya barely slept that night, her mind racing through legal precedents, strategic options, and contingency plans, while Chester maintained vigilant watch beside her sleeping bag. Every few hours, the dog would lift his head and test the air with subtle movements that suggested his acute senses were detecting changes in their environment that human perception couldn't identify. By dawn, Chester's behavior had shifted into the alert, protective stance that would define this chapter's central crisis. His body remained relaxed enough to avoid alarming the children, but every muscle carried the tension of someone, or in this case, something, prepared for immediate action. His positioning near the boarding house's main window provided optimal observation of all approaches to their community while maintaining quick access to Maya and the children. "They're coming earlier than expected," Luna announced from her position at the emergency radio, which had been crackling with coordinated communications since before sunrise. Multiple vehicles approaching from the main road, plus what sounds like helicopter support circling about 5 miles out. Her technical expertise had evolved to include tactical analysis, interpreting official radio traffic with the skill of someone whose life had depended on understanding adult institutional behavior. Maya gathered the children in the general store, the same space where they had first learned to trust each other only weeks earlier. The historical documents that had revealed her family's connection to Millfield lay spread across the counter like battle plans, their legal significance about to be tested against forces that had resources and authority that their small community couldn't match through conventional means. "Remember what we discussed," Maya said, her voice carrying calm authority despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "I am the legal owner of this property through inheritance rights established in 1889. You are visiting relatives participating in alternative education and community service projects. Everything we've built here is legitimate, legal, and beneficial to everyone involved." Sage had transformed into their unofficial tactical coordinator, her natural leadership abilities, enhanced by strategic thinking that impressed Maya with its sophistication. "David and Carmen will document everything with cameras and audio recording," she announced, distributing equipment they had prepared for this confrontation. "Marcus and Luna will maintain communications monitoring and technical support. Phoenix, Zoe and I will demonstrate our education progress and community integration." The first dust cloud appeared on the horizon at exactly 8:47 a.m., followed by additional vehicles that suggested coordination between agencies that rarely cooperated. On routine investigations, Maya counted at least 6 official cars and trucks, plus several civilian vehicles that likely contained corporate representatives whose interests went far beyond child welfare concerns. Chester's protective stance intensified as the convoy approached. His attention focused not on the official vehicles, but on the helicopter that Luna had predicted. The aircraft maintained distance, while obviously conducting surveillance, its presence adding military overtones to what should have been a routine social services visit. Maya watched through binoculars as the vehicles arranged themselves in a formation that blocked all exit routes from Millfield, a tactical deployment that suggested this visit had been planned with law enforcement precision rather than social work sensitivity. The message was clear. No one was leaving until official objectives had been achieved. The delegation that emerged from the vehicles represented a collaboration of interests that confirmed Maya's worst suspicions about the true motivations behind their investigation. Janet Morrison from Social Services was accompanied by county building inspectors, environmental assessment specialists, representatives from Apex Development Corporation, and enough law enforcement officers to handle serious criminal activity. rather than child welfare concerns. But Maya had prepared surprises of her own, made possible by research that had revealed community allies whose existence she hadn't suspected. Her laptop computer, powered by their solar array and connected through satellite internet, displayed video conference windows that would provide remote witnesses to whatever happened during the next few hours. Dr. Rebecca Martinez from UNLV's Social Work Department, Maya announced to the children as she opened the first connection. She's researching alternative family structures and has agreed to evaluate our community for academic documentation. The professor's presence in the video call provided professional credibility that social services would find difficult to dismiss. Additional connections revealed other allies: a family law attorney who specialized in kinship care arrangements, a representative from the Nevada Historical Preservation Society who was fascinated by the trust documents, and most surprisingly, a congressional aide from the House Subcommittee on Strategic Minerals who had been investigating corporate manipulation of mineral rights on public and private lands. Chester seemed to approve of these developments, his protective stance softening slightly while maintaining alert readiness for whatever threats the approaching delegation might represent. His ability to assess human intentions had become legendary among the children, and Maya had learned to trust his instincts about adult behavior more than her own analytical abilities. The knock on the general store's front door came at exactly 9:15 a.m., accompanied by the sound of footsteps surrounding the building in what could have been interpreted as either protective positioning or tactical containment. Maya opened the door with Chester beside her, both of them projecting calm confidence. Despite the overwhelming official presence gathered outside, Ms. Jenkins, Janet Morrison began, with professional courtesy that barely concealed underlying tension. We need to conduct a comprehensive assessment of conditions here, including interviews with any minors who may be residing on the property. Her words were carefully chosen to avoid direct accusations while establishing official authority to investigate whatever they might find. Of course, Maya replied, gesturing toward the children who had arranged themselves in positions that showcased their education, health, and obvious emotional well-being. As you can see, we have several young relatives visiting for extended alternative education experiences. They're participating in sustainable living projects, historical research, and community service learning that has produced remarkable results. Carmen stepped forward with a presentation folder containing documentation they had prepared for exactly this moment. Our academic progress reports, health records, and project portfolios, she announced with the confidence of someone who had nothing to hide and everything to gain from official scrutiny. Her resemblance to the girl in the historical photographs was particularly striking this morning, as if Eleanor Patterson's spirit was channeling through her descendant to defend the sanctuary her family had established. The corporate representatives were clearly more interested in the buildings and surrounding land than in child welfare issues. Their attention focused on geological surveys and mineral assessments rather than educational progress or family dynamics. Maya watched them measuring distances, taking photographs, and consulting documents that obviously related to development plans rather than social services concerns. We're also documenting this visit for academic research purposes, Maya announced, indicating the laptop displaying her video conference connections. Dr. Martinez from UNLV is studying alternative family structures, while Representative Johnson's aide is investigating corporate influence on family displacement issues. The presence of congressional attention visibly affected the corporate representatives' behavior, their casual confidence replaced by careful attention to legal procedures. David had positioned himself strategically to document everything with multiple cameras while appearing to simply assist with the presentation of their community achievements. His technical skills and analytical abilities made him their most effective witness to whatever official decisions might emerge from this confrontation. Luna continued monitoring emergency radio frequencies while contributing to conversations about their educational progress and community sustainability projects. Her expertise with communications technology impressed even the law enforcement officers, several of whom began asking technical questions about their solar power systems and emergency preparedness protocols. Chester maintained his protective position throughout the morning, his presence providing emotional stability for the children, while serving as an early warning system for any escalation in official aggression. Maya noticed that even the most skeptical investigators seemed to relax slightly around him, his calm competence communicating more effectively than words about the positive environment they had created together. The tension reached its peak when the Apex development representatives began discussing land use assessments and mineral extraction possibilities within earshot of the children. Maya realized this was the moment when their battle would shift from bureaucratic procedure to corporate warfare, with her family's sanctuary becoming collateral damage in a struggle over resources worth millions of dollars. But she was ready. The documents Phoenix had discovered, the legal framework Eleanor Patterson had established, and the community allies she had assembled represented more than defensive resources. They represented the foundation for fighting back against forces that had underestimated both her determination and her capabilities. As afternoon approached and the initial assessments concluded, Maya understood that the real confrontation was about to begin. The stakes included not just their family's survival, but the preservation of a legacy that had been designed specifically to protect vulnerable communities against exactly the kind of institutional pressure they were facing. Chester's protective stance had evolved throughout the day into something approaching readiness for action, his instincts apparently detecting escalating tensions that would soon require more than passive resistance. The battle for Millfield's future was about to enter its decisive phase, with everything they had built together hanging in the balance. The confrontation escalated when representatives from Apex Development Corporation demanded immediate access to conduct necessary geological assessments of the property, their tone suggesting they expected compliance rather than negotiation. Maya realized this moment would define everything that followed, and she needed witnesses beyond the official delegation that had conflicting interests in the outcome. She pulled out her smartphone, the device that would become this chapter's defining artifact, and activated the livestream feature that connected directly to her social media accounts. Within minutes, the broadcast was reaching viewers who had never heard of Millfield but were about to become invested in the battle between corporate power and family preservation. This is Maya Jenkins, broadcasting live from Millfield, Nevada. She announced to both the growing online audience and the official delegation gathered in front of the general store. What you're witnessing is an attempt by Apex Development Corporation to displace a legally established family sanctuary in order to access mineral resources that they don't own and have no right to extract. The corporate representatives immediately objected to being filmed, their aggressive demands for Maya to stop recording, revealing their discomfort with public scrutiny of tactics that they preferred to conduct away from independent oversight. Janet Morrison from Social Services appeared torn between her official duties and growing awareness that this situation involved complications far beyond standard child welfare procedures. Chester positioned himself between Maya and the most agitated corporate representative, his protective instincts apparently recognizing escalating threat levels that required intervention. His calm but unmistakably alert presence seemed to remind everyone that they were being watched by more than electronic devices, and that aggressive behavior toward his family would not be tolerated regardless of official authority. The legal documentation is quite clear, Maya continued, for the benefit of both her live stream audience and the official delegation. She held up the property deed and trust documents that Phoenix had discovered. This property was purchased legitimately through an online auction, and my ownership rights are reinforced by inheritance claims that date back to the original founding families of Millfield. Carmen stepped forward with the presentation materials that documented their educational progress, community organization, and sustainable living achievements. Her resemblance to the historical photographs provided powerful visual evidence of the family connections that legitimized their presence in Millfield, while her articulate explanation of their learning outcomes impressed even the most skeptical. Observers, "We're not just surviving here," Carmen explained to the cameras and officials simultaneously. "We're thriving through educational approaches that address individual learning styles and real-world problem-solving in ways that traditional institutions never provided." Her confidence and competence contradicted every stereotype about neglected or abandoned children, forcing officials to confront evidence that challenged their preconceptions about alternative family structures. The live stream was attracting viewers at an exponential rate, comments flooding in from people who recognized the larger implications of corporate entities using government agencies to displace families for mineral extraction rights. Maya watched the viewer count climb past 10,000, then 20,000, as the story spread through social networks that connected people who understood the significance of what was happening in their small Nevada community. David had strategically positioned multiple cameras to document the proceedings from different angles, ensuring that any aggressive behavior by officials would be recorded and preserved for future legal proceedings. His technical competence impressed even the law enforcement officers, several of whom began treating him as a colleague rather than a potential problem requiring supervision. Luna continued monitoring emergency communications while contributing to the live stream's audio quality, her expertise with radio technology allowing her to detect coordination between agencies that confirmed their suspicions about the true nature of this investigation. The emergency frequencies revealed tactical planning that went far beyond routine social services protocols. Marcus demonstrated the solar power systems and mechanical innovations that had transformed Millfield from an abandoned ghost town into a fully functional modern community. His explanations of sustainable technology implementations provided compelling evidence of educational achievement, while showcasing practical applications of learning that most conventional schools never offered. The online audience was responding, with passionate support for their families' right to remain together, while simultaneously expressing outrage about corporate manipulation of government agencies for private profit. Comments included offers of legal assistance, media support, and political advocacy from viewers who recognized that Millfield's situation represented broader issues affecting communities throughout the country. Phoenix and Zoe, the youngest members of their family, provided the most powerful testimony simply by being themselves. Healthy, happy, articulate children whose obvious emotional security contradicted every justification for forced separation that officials might have considered. Their presence in the live stream generated protective responses from viewers who understood that bureaucratic procedures could destroy thriving families in the name of institutional compliance. Janet Morrison appeared increasingly uncomfortable as she realized that her department's involvement in what was essentially a corporate land grab was being documented and broadcast to thousands of witnesses. The social services investigation that should have focused on child welfare had clearly been manipulated to serve interests that had nothing to do with family preservation or child protection. The Apex development representatives were becoming visibly agitated by the public attention their tactics were receiving, their demands for immediate geological access revealing desperation that suggested time-sensitive pressures related to corporate extraction schedules. Maya realized that live streaming the confrontation had fundamentally altered the power dynamics by introducing accountability that corporate entities preferred to avoid. Chester's protective stance intensified as tensions reached a critical point, his instincts apparently detecting escalation patterns that required immediate intervention to protect his family from forces that no longer respected legal or ethical boundaries. The turning point came when Luna announced that something extraordinary was happening beyond their immediate confrontation. Multiple vehicles approaching from town, she reported, her radio monitoring having detected convoy traffic that didn't match official agency communications. Maya looked toward the main road and felt her heart surge with hope as she recognized what was arriving to support their family. The first vehicle contained Dr. Rebecca Martinez from UNLV, whose video conference participation had evolved into physical presence at what she recognized as a historically significant moment for alternative family research. Behind her came a caravan that represented community support Maya hadn't known existed, neighboring ranch families, tribal representatives from the local Shoshone community, and volunteers from children's advocacy organizations who had responded to social media appeals generated by the live stream. But the most powerful arrival was entirely unexpected. A mail truck carrying hundreds of letters and packages that had been expedited to Millfield in response to the viral broadcast. The postal worker, clearly overwhelmed by the unprecedented volume of mail addressed to their remote location, announced that delivery trucks would be arriving throughout the day with support from people across the country who had been moved by their family's story. Carmen immediately began opening packages that contained everything from educational supplies to legal documents. But the most significant discovery was a carefully organized petition that had been coordinated through online advocacy groups. The community petition, this chapter's defining artifact, contained over 10,000 signatures from people demanding recognition of Millfield as a legitimate family sanctuary and condemning corporate manipulation of government agencies for mineral extraction purposes. These are signatures from teachers, social workers, child psychologists, and family law experts, Carmen announced as she read through pages of professional endorsements. Every single person signing this petition is demanding that officials recognize what we've built here rather than destroying it for corporate profits. Her voice carried the emotional weight of someone who had never experienced such overwhelming support from adult communities that had previously failed her. Sage took the petition and began reading selected entries aloud for the benefit of both the live stream audience and the increasingly uncomfortable official delegation. From Dr. Sarah Williams, Director of Alternative Education Research at UC Berkeley, the Millfield community represents precisely the kind of innovative family structure that child welfare agencies should be studying and supporting, not dismantling. Each professional endorsement reinforced their legitimacy while undermining justifications for forced separation. The arrival of community allies shifted the entire dynamic of the confrontation from isolated family defending themselves against institutional power to community-supported sanctuary receiving protection from people who understood the broader implications of what was at stake. Maya realized that live streaming their situation had connected them to networks of support that corporate interests couldn't manipulate or intimidate. Phoenix stepped forward with the quiet confidence that had characterized all his contributions to their family, addressing the officials with words that carried emotional truth more powerful than legal arguments. This is the first place I've ever lived where adults keep their promises and where nobody hurts children for being different. His simple testimony provided moral clarity that cut through bureaucratic complexity and corporate justifications. Janet Morrison appeared visibly moved by Phoenix's words. her professional detachment cracking as she confronted the reality that her department's investigation was threatening to destroy exactly the kind of successful family placement that social services claim to seek. Maya watched her struggle with competing loyalties between institutional procedures and professional ethics. The Apex Development representatives made one final attempt to assert their interests, demanding immediate access to conduct geological surveys that they claimed were necessary for proper environmental assessment. But Dr. Martinez stepped forward with legal documentation that had arrived with the community supporters. Environmental impact studies require extensive public comment, periods, and independent oversight, especially when rare earth mineral extraction is involved, she announced. Any attempt to circumvent those processes would violate federal law. Maya felt the power dynamics shift decisively in their favor as corporate representatives realized they were facing not isolated children, but a community with legal resources, media attention, and political connections that could expose and challenge their manipulation of government agencies. The live stream audience had grown to over 50,000 viewers, including journalists and political figures whose presence ensured continued scrutiny of whatever decisions emerged from this confrontation. Chester seemed to sense the changing atmosphere, his protective stance relaxing slightly as threats diminished and community support increased. His presence had provided emotional stability throughout the crisis, demonstrating the same loyalty and protective instincts that had guided Maya to purchase Millfield in the first place. "The children stay with their family," Maya announced with the authority of someone whose legal position had been reinforced by community support and media attention. "This property remains a sanctuary for families who choose each other rather than being assigned by institutions. And anyone attempting to displace us for corporate profit will face not just our resistance, but accountability from people across the country who are watching and supporting our right to exist." The official delegation began coordinating their withdrawal as it became clear that their mission had failed, while community allies started planning celebrations and long-term support systems for the family that had become a symbol of successful alternative child welfare approaches. The battle for Millfield was over, but the victory represented something larger, proof that communities could organize to protect vulnerable families against institutional and corporate forces that valued profit over people. 6 months after the confrontation that had drawn national attention to their small Nevada community, Maya stood before the newly installed town sign that marked Millfield's transformation from forgotten ghost town to officially recognized sanctuary. The sign, bright blue letters on weather-resistant aluminum, professionally manufactured and properly mounted, read, "Millfield, Population 8, in bold typography that reflected pride rather than apology for their unconventional family structure. The number 8 included Chester, whose official status as Community Safety Coordinator had been established through documentation that recognized his contributions to family welfare and security. Maya smiled as she remembered the bureaucratic discussions required to include a dog in official population counts, but their family's definition of membership had never been limited by conventional categories. Chester himself lounged in the shade of the general store's front porch, his graying muzzle and contented expression reflecting the deep satisfaction of someone whose life had found perfect purpose. At 12 years old, he had achieved something remarkable, the transformation from rescue dog seeking a home to patriarch of a community that provided sanctuary for others seeking the same thing he had once needed. The boarding house bustled with activity as Carmen prepared for her remote presentation to UC Berkeley's Alternative Education Conference, where she would describe their community's learning outcomes for academic researchers studying innovative approaches to child welfare and family structures. At 15, She had developed expertise in sustainable agriculture and renewable energy systems that impressed university professors who had initially been skeptical about education outside traditional institutions. Marcus emerged from the workshop. He had constructed behind the hotel, wiping his hands on a cloth stained with the honest dirt of mechanical work that provided both personal satisfaction and community benefit. His latest project, a wind power system to supplement their solar array, demonstrated the kind of practical innovation that had attracted attention from engineering programs at several universities, all of whom were interested in recruiting someone whose education had been grounded in real-world problem-solving rather than abstract theoretical study. David had claimed the old church as his research center, where he maintained their communications equipment while pursuing independent study in electronics and computer programming that had already resulted in freelance consulting contracts with technology companies impressed by his self-directed learning outcomes. His transformation from anxious child seeking emotional stability to confident adolescent contributing to family income represented exactly the kind of success story that social services claimed to seek but rarely achieved through conventional placement procedures. Luna's meteorological predictions had become so accurate that the National Weather Service had begun incorporating her observations into regional forecasting models, while her expertise with radio communications had established Millfield as an unofficial emergency coordination point for the entire area. Her technical skills, developed through necessity and refined through practice, now provided both community safety and external recognition of their family's contributions to regional security. Phoenix had grown 3 inches and gained the confident posture of someone whose special abilities were valued rather than dismissed as childhood imagination. His talent for finding lost objects and predicting weather patterns had evolved into something approaching intuitive understanding of environmental systems that scientists from UNLV visited regularly to study and document. At 8 years old, he possessed knowledge that would have impressed graduate students in environmental science. Zoe's artistic abilities had flourished in ways that would have been impossible in conventional educational settings, her drawings and paintings now displayed in the renovated hotel lobby that served as their community's cultural center. Her work captured emotional truths about family, belonging, and home that spoke to visitors who came from around the country to observe their alternative family model and learn from their experiences. Sage had assumed the role of community coordinator, with natural authority that impressed social workers, researchers, and government officials who visited Millfield to study their family structure and educational approaches. At 16, she possessed organizational skills and emotional intelligence that qualified her for leadership positions in any community, while her experience with alternative family systems had made her a sought-after consultant for child welfare. Agencies attempting to develop more flexible placement options, Maya herself had undergone the most profound transformation, evolving from isolated software engineer seeking connection to community leader whose expertise in sustainable technology and alternative family structures had attracted speaking engagements at conferences across the country. A book about their experiences, Finding Home: How Loneliness Led to Family, had become required reading in social work programs while providing royalties that ensured their community's long-term financial stability. The house that had once felt like a cage in San Francisco had been sold, with proceeds invested in expanding Millfield's capacity to provide sanctuary for additional families who didn't fit conventional definitions but possessed the bonds that made communities work. Recent arrivals included 2 teenagers who had aged out of foster care and a grandmother caring for grandchildren whose parents couldn't provide stable homes, all of whom had found in Millfield the acceptance and support that institutional systems had failed to offer. Their story had inspired legislation in 3 states, establishing legal frameworks for alternative family structures, while their educational model had been adopted by communities seeking innovative approaches to child welfare and learning. The $100 impulse purchase that had begun as an attempt to escape loneliness had evolved into a movement that was changing how society understood family, education, and community responsibility. As evening approached and solar-powered, lights began illuminating their community. Maya gathered with her family around the dinner table that David had constructed from reclaimed wood, sharing food that Carmen had grown in their expanded gardens, while listening to stories that Phoenix had collected from visitors who came seeking what they had found: home. Chester settled beside Maya's chair with the deep contentment of someone whose purpose had been fulfilled beyond anything he might have imagined during his early years in a rescue shelter. His presence anchored them all to the simple truth that had guided their journey from the beginning. Sometimes the family you need finds you when you're brave enough to open your heart to possibilities that don't fit conventional expectations. Outside, the desert wind whispered through sagebrush around buildings that had sheltered multiple generations of families who understood that home isn't defined by blood or law, but by the willingness to care for each other through whatever challenges life might bring. The ghost town of Millfield had become something extraordinary, a place where loneliness transformed into love, where abandoned children found parents who chose them deliberately, and where the courage to be different created space for others to discover who they were meant to become. The population sign would need updating soon. Other families were already inquiring about joining their community. But for now, 8 was perfect. 7 humans and 1 dog who had found each other across impossible odds and built something that would endure long after they were all gone, a legacy of chosen family and unconditional love that honored the vision of founders, who had understood over a century ago that sanctuary begins when someone decides to make room for everyone who needs a place to belong.